Good afternoon. My name is Officer Danny Ron. I'm with the Building and Enforcement Services Department here at City Hall in Deltona. Today's segment will be on cruelty and neglect on animals. We deal majority of the times with cats and dogs, every so often with wildlife, but today in particular is more on the dogs and cats when it comes to neglect and cruelty. Our duties in our department in the animal control section is being responsible for picking up stray dogs and cats, investigating animal bites, abandonment, cruelty cases, and other complaints with dealing with these animals. Our goal is to keep all owned animals confined to their property and to ensure animals are vaccinated and licensed. Our objectives are to minimize the risk of rabies outbreak and threat to the public health and safety by vaccinating the majority of dogs and cats against the disease, to reduce the number of dogs and cats euthanized at the Humane Society, to provide a proactive response to dangerous dogs, to reduce the number of animal bites, to provide the public with a timely response to complaints and adequate follow-up to ensure complaint resolution, to promote responsible pet ownership. When I get a simple neglect cruelty case, what I mean by basic, it could be just something that an animal that's outside, a dog that's tied up into a tree or outside without proper shelter. I would consider that kind of like a basic case unless it's in distress, that we have authorization to take the animal off the property. If depends on the case how severity of the issue is. Water, it's very important, especially for an animal here in Florida. This time period, the temperature today, I think the weather index mentioned it was about 110 degrees outside. So it's hot out there on Florida. So we definitely want to take care of pets, and that's what our job is, to look out for these animals. Today I have Officer Danita Thompson and Officer Richard Lovett. I brought them here today because they've had a lot more experience with me with cruelty and neglect cases. Today we actually went out before we got here. We were looking at previous cases, and I'm glad I picked these two because I've seen some of the cases they've had, and they were really serious cases. And a lot of them went in front of a judge because of the severity of the cruelty to these animals. How long have you been doing this job, Danita?
About 6.5 years.
6.5 years. She just joined our department here. Now, what, a couple of months now?
Roughly 8 months.
Roughly 8 months. Yeah. And but where did you previously work at?
City of Jacksonville.
City of Jacksonville. There's a video that's on YouTube. It was during that period that she was working in Jacksonville. I liked the video, and we will have that available towards the end of the segment. It's a really good video, and it had to do with cruelty and some of the cases she had to deal with. Officer Lovett's with our department for over 10 years. How long you been with us?
13 years.
13 years. When I first joined the department, he was my partner, and he actually taught me a lot. I had no animal background, but this gentleman here, he took care of me, took me under his wing, and we've been dealing with animal cases ever since. And he's got some pretty interesting cases here in Deltona. What you, as an animal control officer, when you go to somebody's house, what do you, give me some things that you expect from an animal owner?
Sometimes not easily come by, but a cooperation. Allow me to see the animal in question.
Right. When dealing with, let's say, dogs that are outside, what is the state requirement on those animals?
State requirement? Well, every city's ordinance is different in regards to what is required. Definitely water at all times has to be available, in some form of shelter. If the dog is tethered, chained up, it has to be of the proper length to be acceptable.
What's considered the proper length? Minimum. I know we know, but I'm just
minimum
trying to get that
is over
information
6
out
feet.
there. 6 feet, definitely 6 feet. I've seen cases short. I mean, the people were actually using leashes as a restraint, and No, yeah, some of these leashes are not even 6 feet long. Definitely more than that.
And one of the things you got to remember when you're chaining the dog up outside, one of the worst things to ever put on the dog when you're chaining it up is actually a choke collar. They're made for walking, they're great for walking, but the bad part about with a choke collar, and I know you've seen it before, T, and I've seen it, is dog's gotten on a chain can reach a fence, dog's going to jump over the fence and actually hung itself and killed itself because it choked itself out. So we always try and tell people, if you're putting it outside, use some other kind of collar, whether it wraps around the body, around the neck, but a choke collar, there's too much chance of it getting caught up and actually strangling the dog.
There's something else people fail to take note of is when they will chain a dog up, they're too close to a tree or a chair. Next thing you know, this what was once a 6-foot chain or leash is now maybe 18 inches because they've got themselves wrapped up. They can't reach the water that may or may not be provided for the animal. So people need to look at where they're tethering, chaining their dogs up at to make sure the dog's not going to get himself all wrapped up and entangled.
Sure. The water part, I'm just as soon as you mentioned about the water, a little bowl, a lot of times dogs knock those bowls over, and guess what? That water's gone. What I have noticed, we advise maybe a big jug and actually bury it in the ground. That way it doesn't get knocked over, and make sure that thing is filled up and it should be fresh water. Because trust me, I've been to some houses and they said there's water in there. When I go look and it's green and it looks like it's been there forever, I don't know if they were expecting water to go in there because of the rain, but yeah, that's not suitable for that. I treat my animal, I have dogs and cats, and I treat them like they're my children. I wouldn't want them drinking that kind of stuff. So our part though is education, main thing, and second part is enforcement if it doesn't be taken care of. But we do have notices we drop off. Let's just say the owners are not home, or even I still give the pamphlets out to them because it does cover not just one particular ordinance, it covers other ones that they might not be familiar with. I'm gonna have it here to the camera. Here's a list of ordinances basic ones that we cover. And we would check off the date we were there, the location we went to, and on the top to the right, it should have the re-inspect date. We make sure we go back there and re-inspect, make sure the violations that were are taken care of by that time. In the front, it's basically saying this is a courtesy notice. Please comply within the required time. Our number to our department and the inspector, that code enforcement officer's name is on there. If you have any questions, to call them. Anything y'all want to add about the notices?
The notices are pretty straightforward. They just help out with what you have to do, the knowledge that they need to know.
Yeah. Okay. Right here, we also, not just city ordinances, we also have Florida statutes, state laws. I think once we start dealing with the big cases, in depth, severe cases of neglect and cruelty, we go into our law book because most likely we'll be taking those respondents, that party, in front of a judge due to the severity of the case. Some of the charts, it makes it easier for us to kind of keep track of. We have, it's called body conditioning system chart. We use the Purina one. 1 through 9. It gives us an idea how bad the case would be. This is the neatest copy. On one side it has the dog, and the other side has the cat. I usually look it up on the internet on my computer. I do have a copy with me. It's kind of old, but this one is really good, the one she's kept. When I do have a kind of an issue with a dog, you see that's skinny, definitely reference this to so I can address the issues from there on. Do you all use this kind?
Absolutely. I myself find this chart very helpful when you do have a criminal case. It's This particular scale is used throughout the country. It's a well-known with any animal advocates, and there's consistency across the board so that when you do go into court, if it is a criminal case, that you know that a 1 is about as bad as you're going to get out there. And it's a very sad situation when you see a 1.
Yeah, 1 is you're near death, and that's the worst part that you want to be. You never want to see that.
With some of the cruelty cases, neglect cases, let's go to hoarding, because we have seen a couple of those. We do have one case. I have a couple of pictures. We have more pictures. They're adding it into the segment here towards the end. When it comes to hoarding, let's elaborate on that one.
Well, with hoarding, you get the person that really, they care. To them, they're doing what they think is the best thing for the animal. What they're not realizing is they need to step out and look at it from a different angle. When you're walking into these and the urine levels are high inside the house, which means the ammonia is really bad, it causes upper respiratory infections and everything else like that. Plus you got the feces on the floor. It's not the healthiest condition, and it will actually start to tear down the inside of the animal from the amount of ammonia that's inside the house. That's why a lot of times when we go in the houses, we have to wear the mask. You know, sometimes we have to go into an actual full body suit because it's just too bad to just wear a mask. You got to have everything covered. But they feel that they're doing the right thing. But they get overwhelmed. And that's what we get a lot of times is, you know, we'll reach out and go, why didn't you, you know, we came to you, we tried to help you. Why didn't you just work with us? You know, we would have done everything we could to help you. Well, I just got overwhelmed and I got scared. You know what? Don't be scared. We want to help you. We'd rather take the animals and help you and try and figure out a way so, you know, this doesn't happen again compared to sitting there taking you and pressing charges against you. That's one of the last things we want to do. We want to help the person out. That's the main point.
What would be I believe it was 9, well, I can't mention the street. One of the first cases I was involved in helping you out. How many animals did we take out of that one house?
Out of that house, we took 69 animals.
69 animals. How many, were the majority cats or dogs?
It was a majority of cats.
Cats.
And they were actually, every room had animals in it. There was no room that was actually that you could live in. Inside, there was kennels stacked on top of each other. And inside the kennels, once the feces would get too high, another piece of paper would be stuck on top of it for it to go again. So every cage that we pulled out there had about 6 to 8 inches of feces sitting inside of it.
I remember that. It would take, it would be a small kennel. I said, let's say the smallest one that I remembered is one of those, I think 18 inches by 24 inches. And guess what? It would take like 2 people to carry that thing out of there because it was so heavy. So much feces had been there and built up on there.
Richard, don't you find, especially in cat hoarding cases, unfortunately, the great majority, if not all of the animals, all the cats removed typically are sick because of the highly contagious diseases among them, living in the conditions. A couple cats get sick. They're living in the conditions so close, and they're all sick by the time we step in. Unfortunately, where the owners of these animals are trying to do the right thing, because they're there every day, they don't see the slow progression of these animals becoming sick and sicker, and to the point they just really don't see it.
And they don't see this. They don't understand the smell either. To them, you don't smell anything. They don't realize they get immune to it after a while, and that's what they don't understand is after a while with it, you get immune to it.
Yeah, it was a woman, that one particular case, and she walked in the house like it was nothing. I could not walk in there without the suit. And
I went in about 10 feet without a suit.
Yeah, he hit 10 feet. Now, oof.
Changed your mind, huh?
Yeah, it changed my mind real quick.
So yeah, they get immune to it, and
and unfortunately, a lot of the owners, they also have some sort of health issues, respiratory issues.
They'll have respiratory issues a lot of times, and you'll see one of the pictures that we actually do have is is a cat, and the eyes actually started to bulge out. That's from being an upper respiratory infection. That's caused from the ammonia levels being so high inside the house that the upper respiratory infection starts to build up inside, and the first place the pressure pushes out is the eyes. So that's what you see a lot of, is the eyes start to pop out, and they just don't realize that's one of the signs for an upper respiratory.
We had another case. This was a small breed dogs, Chihuahuas, Rat Terriers. I'm gonna go flip some of the pictures. This was a house that maybe was no more than 2 or 3 years old. So it was a pretty new house that was constructed, 2-floor house, so it's a big house inside. I believe it was close to 2,400 square feet inside, and we found, I think, between 60 to 70 dogs in this house. Here are some of the pictures. This is a suit we wear. It's very thin. They rip pretty easy, but it helped us try to keep that feces and urine off of our rest of our uniform. I don't think I've kept any uniforms after I had to go into these houses in the first place. I've actually trashed the boots, the trousers, the blouse that I was wearing that day.
And you'll actually, even with those, and like when we were talking about the first one we did, I know when we left that house, because we were there for, I want to say 7 hours.
Wow, we were there all day. That was an all-day thing.
Suits. And even though you have those suits on, you still get that on your body. And I remember first thing I did was leave and go home and you clean up, and it was like, you wouldn't believe the amount that was coming off you. And you just don't feel like you can get clean after that. It's like, how can somebody not notice what it's like?
The fire department usually support us by providing the equipment, the mask, the tanks, the air tanks, and because those tanks only last just a couple of hours, especially if you're breathing too heavy, going in there, chasing these animals, trying to capture them so we can bring them out safely. Now these are photos inside. And the dark spots you see, that's all feces and urine. And I believe this is like the living room. This is the kitchen. Now these dogs were getting fed, but pretty much just big bag, 40-pound bag was just ripped open, and just all dogs had access to them. One big thing I want to cover, that none of these animals were found spayed or neutered in this house, so they were multiplying inside this house. A little dark picture, but you can see some of the eyes. So there, 60 to 70 dogs in this house when we took them out.
One deceased on the floor.
Yeah, we did find one that was deceased. It wasn't that long, but yeah, that was.
Yes, you can tell they're all related.
Yeah.
Related. And you can see how they destroyed the walls and
No doubt.
and everything else just to go through.
Now this house, none of the neighbors knew there were dogs in this house. It just happened to be this one day, one of the dogs, because the owner had left the window cracked just enough that one of them was able to, I guess one of the smallest ones was able to get out, and it showed up next door. The next door neighbor called us saying, hey, I think you need to come out here and check this out because I think there's more dogs inside the house. When we showed up, it was still daylight, so it was kind of hard to see inside the house. Once we got our flashlight, we looked inside, and all I saw was a lot of eyes out there inside this house. And they were pretty fast, too. They're small breeds. A lot of them had the eye issues. Okay, so that's just one case. We have more pictures coming for other cases with hoarding. Now, let's go into the cruelty cases. What kind of cases have you seen that dealt with cruelty? I've seen a photo of a collar, embedded collar.
Embedded collar, that can be a big problem. People don't realize they bring this cute little puppy home from the store, they put the collar on it, they fail to check the collar to make sure they can get a couple fingers up underneath it, or they bring the puppy home, they chain it up outside, and they're doing good to give food to the dog, much less check the collar. Just about any embedded collar I've come across, I could usually smell it before I could actually visually see it. The smell of rotting skin. It's very sad. It's always amazed me that the spirit that the dogs will exhibit, even though you're looking at something that you can't even begin to fathom the pain, but the dogs still should have the spirit there. And they usually do recuperate quite well from that with scar tissue. However, I've seen quite a bit of that, as well as Richard rightly pointed out, the choke collars, people tying them up, accidentally hanging themselves. I've dealt with several short, heavy chains, overloading, overburdening the animal, or just leaving them out in the cold with no shelter, to where they basically freeze and starve to death. I dealt with quite a bit of that, sadly, in Jacksonville.
Due to the Florida summers, it gets really hot. I want to talk about cars left inside, dogs left inside cars. We do get, every so often, get cases on that. Big stores, people go in there shopping, only expecting to go there for a couple of minutes. But does it actually take, how long would it take for that car to get hot right now in Florida heat?
It only takes a few minutes for that car to heat up to get to a point where it can start messing you up.
Yeah.
And that's what they don't understand, even with the windows cracked.
Yeah.
You don't want to take a chance. If you got to go to the store, leave it at home. It's really one of the easiest things, because anything can happen. You can walk into the store just to go in there and get something quick, run into somebody, start talking, and just be in there for 10 minutes, and before you realize, you come out and your dog's dead.
And leaving a bowl of water, however it may help, is not. It's not going to take care of it's not going to be sufficient.
Because you can take a cold water, go stick it in your vehicle, come back in 10 minutes, and you feel it, and it's already started to get warm. So you really want to just leave them at home. It's really about the best thing I can always say, especially in Florida.
I know Richard had a case on dogfighting case, which is a real good case. I was with you that time. Elaborate a little bit more on that one. I like that one.
We actually got lucky on that one. We received a complaint, and another officer had looked at it, and he thought he had something, but he wasn't sure. So I went back, and when we did, we had noticed some of the paraphernalia, and we were able to execute the warrant off of that. And when we did the warrant and actually went to the house, as we got to the house, the dog was actually on the treadmill at the time doing it. And when I say on the treadmill, they put them on the treadmill, boards on each side, so the dog cannot get off it. It has no choice but to go at whatever speed they put it on. And they put it on with a thick chain, so the dog, if it falls, it's going to get drugged. There's no way for it to do anything. They actually had a weight belt beside of it that you can actually put on the dog too, which at that time it wasn't. But when I got in there, and one of the first things I did was walk in that room, and we shut it off. That dog was exhausted, and the timer read 89 minutes. And you can imagine 89 minutes, and it was at a fat burn, which is one of the pictures that we pulled.
Yeah, and one of those pictures. That picture is in will be in there in the segment.
Don't you find that anytime you come across a true fighting pit bull, they're usually very people friendly?
Well, they're extremely.
Yeah.
And
it's very sad that
they were, and the bad part about it is we took 6 adult dogs and 2 puppies, and the puppies were only 3 months old. But within 2 weeks, the puppies actually had to be put down because they became so aggressive. They couldn't be in the same cage together. They were trying to get out the cage together. I mean, they just, and the Humane Society did not want to put them up because they couldn't get them to calm down. They just were extremely animal aggressive.
And it's sad to see a dog that can be so loving to humans, but can't be in society simply because they're so animal aggressive.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the dog, I mean, you see, like one of the dogs that we took out of the backyard of that house actually had a fractured leg, tied up to a huge chain that was, well above the weight of the dog. Dog was skinny. It had scars all over its body. But we put it on a leash, walked right out to the truck. Dog was loving as can be.
Yeah.
But I mean, it didn't even act like it had a broken leg, except for, it would hobble. But, it ended up being a good dog.
Well, you bring up a point. Although the dog had a fractured leg, it was still very friendly and acted like it felt fine. That's something I've always found, that people, especially in a cruelty situation where you have a severely injured dog, and you're trying to discuss this with the animal owner, and they try to convince you the dog's not feeling pain because he's wagging his tail. And people do not realize that animals will not exhibit the pain. They're not sissies like we are, okay? If a dog shows pain, being a pack animal, that shows vulnerability, and they will not show their vulnerability. Dogs with embedded collars, that's the first thing that took me aback when I first went into this, when I saw my first embedded collar. The dog was just wagging its tail, the spirit was still there, dog was exhibiting no pain. And people don't understand that just because your dog's wagging his tail doesn't mean that that broken leg does not need to be treated. It does, you know.
And that was, you know, and I agree with that. I mean, one of my first cruelty cases was with 3 dogs. 2 of them had actually died because of starvation, and the third one was a Dalmatian. And Dalmatian was supposed to weigh right about 45 pounds. It weighed 18 pounds. I mean, yes, the dog is fine today and it's doing great, but it was one of those things. I mean, we got lucky that we got there, and when we went and actually got the owner, she was like, well, they're being fed, they're in the backyard, I know the kids are taking care of them. She was so busy working multiple jobs, she thought the kids were doing it, and the kids weren't doing it.
Right.
You know, and that's one of the bad things about it is if you don't have the time for the animal, it's best not to have it. Because you got to understand is, you know, you got to be able to recognize these things, because if you don't recognize it, then you're going to have us come in there because it's going to be something different. And that's, you know.
Yeah. I have dealt with many people that try to not take the responsibility for their animal because they'll say, well, it's my son's dog. How old's your son? 11. Okay, so I understand exactly what you're saying. They don't realize, as the adults, although the dog may have been brought into the home for the children, it's ultimately their responsibility to make sure the dog is receiving the care that it needs on a daily basis.
Yeah, and they're going to be held accountable no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah, so we have a lot more pictures coming up, so we'll have that towards the end. We also have the video on Danita when she was working at Jacksonville. It's pretty good. It was edited really well, and I'm glad. I want to put it on there.
Yeah, I'm Animal Code Enforcement Officer Danita Thompson. I enforce City Ordinance 462, which is the animal code for the city. That would include running at larges, cruelties, big hoarding cases, or puppy mill situations. And we also are responsible for public safety in regards to rabies control. I have been with the city just under 3 years. I've actually been a field officer for a little over 2 years. I started in the kennel, which that experience was essential to my personal safety. I learned to read animal body language and animal handling skills, which has saved me on more than one occasion in the field. My end goal was to get into cruelty investigations. That's where my true passion is, and I consider myself very fortunate that right now that's what I'm doing. I never know how my day is going to play out. You have to be flexible. In distress calls come in, JSO assists, which I also help out with, as all field officers do. Typically, though, I'll get a complaint. I will answer the complaint going to the address. If possible, I will contact the individual, the citizen that called the complaint in. Unfortunately, especially with cruelty complaints, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, those are made anonymously. People do not want the animal owners to know who called in the complaint for fear of retribution or creating neighbor issues. A lot of people aren't aware of the fact that if you feed a stray, feed an animal for 21 days, legally that animal belongs to you. They don't know that a chain has to be 10 foot long to tie their dog up with. If there's minor violations, you work with them, you explain it, they come in compliance, everybody's happy. It's a win-win situation. You know, you have another educated individual who's going to pass it on to other people. If it's a very bad situation, Obviously, sometimes it's warranted for citations immediately. I do issue citations as a part of my job. The citations we issue are civil. 1 day a week, every other week, a magistrate hears our cases with it because they are code violations. The only thing I care about is that dog tied up right there on that short chain in the blazing sun with no shelter and no water. That's all I care about. When I bring an animal in, when I was doing running at larges, I learned very quickly, you bring them in, you put them on the run. You can't keep following up. Okay, did they get reclaimed? Did they get humanely euthanized? You've got to let it go. It will take a toll on you. And co-workers told me that from the get-go. There was a Cruelty I brought in a year ago. It was May 28th last year. She was a pit bull, and her mate had already died and been buried. The owner already had her grave dug for her. She wasn't dying fast enough, so somebody decided to speed up the process and put a bucket of antifreeze poison out for her. It was her only form of hydration. Bless her heart, she didn't touch it. I called the rescue coordinator. I said, look, we got to do something. An emergency email went out to all the rescue groups. She went into rescue. I visit her to this day. To this day, I look at the before and the after, and you wouldn't even recognize her as being the same dog.
It wasn't while she was working here in Deltona, but it shows that who we have, and I'm glad she's part of our team now, doing the animals. She doesn't just do animals, we all do code enforcement also. We have a great team that we have. Anything else you want to cover before we shut it down?
You know, one of the things I always want to say is a lot of people think the dog's out back. You know, I wouldn't put my dog back there. That's cruelty. Mm-hmm. It's not. It doesn't matter how you feel, and we have to take our feelings out of it a lot of times, and we can only do what the law allows us. If you don't feel it's right, please contact us. Let us know. We'll check it out. But not every case is going to be something, right. And that's why we have to build the cases. We have to figure out what's going on and be able to build something to be able to do anything. And when we build these, you know, we take all of our evidence and we get it all together. And what we do here is we actually get with the department director and we do everything there. And then once we got the case ready to go that we're going to do something, we'll actually contact the state's attorney's office and get with them. So everybody's involved in these cases when we go and do them.
That one particular case with the dog fighting, when did you know? Because I know you knew about this house, but how long before that we actually took those dogs that you knew that something was going on there?
I had actually known about that house for about 4 years. But the laws were different at that time, and it was not illegal to own the paraphernalia. Mm-hmm. You could have the paraphernalia, you could train, you could do all that. It was never illegal. That's now been changed. So when that law became changed and we got a call about the house again, that's when it became time.
And pretty much all the cases that we get with cruelty and neglect, they all came through complaints. You know, we try to be as much proactive out there as possible, but we don't sit at one particular house and just keep an eye out. So it's good that I'm glad the citizens out there actually call us. Even if you don't think if it's a possibility that it's neglect or cruelty, definitely give us a call and we'll go check it out. The majority of the cases we do get, we find nothing. We just educate a little more information to the owner to help them become a more responsible pet owner. But there is so often we do cases like that with neglect and abuse and cruelty.
You know, I'm glad that you pointed that out about we depend on the citizens. I've always told people that we all depend on their ears and eyes because we can't be everywhere. One very severe case that I had it not been for a neighbor that had a second-story bedroom that could overlook a privacy fence, could see down and see this poor dog. Had she not called this in, the dog would have died in that backyard. And I made a point of calling her up and thanking her. In most cases, people that calls and complains will remain anonymous, but she did leave her name and number, so I was able to thank her for making that phone call, because there's no doubt in my mind, had she not called, that dog was going to die in that backyard.
Yes. And calls and complaints can come in anonymous. Sometimes we do need the support of that caller when we have to do with access to view the violation, and that's very important because we need an evidence. We can't just go to somebody's backyard and be looking around. It's actually safety. First of all, it's safety. Second of all, it's privacy issues. We don't want to be liable for any type of those kind of things, but we definitely want to help those animals. Pets, they can't talk. We are their voices, and we will do as much as possible to correct them. Hopefully none of that stuff continues happening, but it does, and that's what we're out there for. That's what we have an animal control department, and we're out there for the residents and the citizens of the city. Well, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. You all have the experience, and I'm glad we're going to have those pictures, the photos, and the video available. Anything you want to add before we shut down again?
Thank you for inviting me here. I've enjoyed it.
I'm glad. See, yeah, 30 minutes.
Thank
Thank you, Richard. All right. Thank you guys for having us, and have a good day.